I am 87 years old now, and the thought of the end visits me often. Perhaps that is why I have agreed to speak with you today, to release something I've carried like a stone in my chest for nearly 50 years. They say confession brings peace. I hope that is true, though some memories leave marks too deep to fade. My name is Catherine Talbot, and I served Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I for 32 years. I was a lady of the Privy Chamber, a polite way of saying I witnessed what few were ever meant to see. I helped her dress. I attended her in her most private hours. I stood close enough to notice every detail, the powder, the scent of her breath, the strain of the crown upon her brow. And I remained silent. You must understand. We all did. It wasn't cruelty that sealed our lips, but fear disguised as loyalty, and loyalty bound by custom. Queens do not invite correction, even when it comes from care. Especially then. Here is the truth. Queen Elizabeth I, Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the woman who ruled an empire and commanded the respect of kings, spent her later years in a quiet decline. And those of us closest to her, out of devotion and dread, allowed it to continue. It began with her habits, particularly her avoidance of bathing. Learned physicians of the age, educated at Cambridge and Oxford, sincerely believed that water opened the pores and invited illness. Once a month was considered excessive. Once every 3 months was prudent. The Queen, who trusted these men with her life, followed their guidance with religious devotion. I remember the smell that began to emanate from her chambers. At first it was subtle, masked by the rosewater and perfumes we sprinkled on her clothing. But as the years passed, it grew stronger. A thick, sweet rot that clung to the tapestries and settled into the velvet of her gowns. The smell of unwashed flesh, of bodily fluids dried into fabric, of chamber pots that sat too long before being emptied. When she moved, the air moved with her, carrying that scent like an invisible shadow. The toilet arrangements were primitive, you see, even for royalty. There was a close stool, a box with a velvet cushion and a pewter pot beneath. Her Majesty would use it, and we would attend her, holding her skirts, maintaining the pretense of dignity, while the reality was anything but dignified. The pot would be emptied into the Thames or the castle moat, but the smell lingered. It soaked into her undergarments, into the layers upon layers of fabric she wore. Without proper bathing, without proper cleaning, it accumulated. We learned to breathe through our mouths when we attended her. We never spoke of it, not even amongst ourselves in whispered conversations. Then there was her face. God help me, her face. She had been beautiful once. I saw the portraits, heard the stories from older servants. But smallpox had scarred her in her youth, leaving her skin pitted and marked. To hide this, she applied a paste made of white lead and vinegar. Ceruse, they called it. It gave her that famous white complexion, smooth as marble, ageless as a statue. She would have it applied every morning, layer upon layer, until her face was a mask. I watched that mask crack as the day wore on. Fine lines would appear around her mouth when she spoke. Powder would flake away, falling onto her ruff like dandruff. Beneath the white, her skin was grey. Sometimes red, sometimes weeping with sores that never properly healed because they never saw air, never saw light, only more lead, more poison, more deception. The lead was killing her, of course. We did not know the word poison applied to it then, but we saw the effects. Her hands trembled. Her memory faltered. She would repeat herself, grow confused about things that had happened only hours before. And still, every morning, more ceruse, more white death painted onto dying skin. Her breath became unbearable. I do not say this to be cruel. I say it because it is the truth, and I am done with anything less than truth. It smelled of rot, of meat left too long in the sun, of something fundamentally wrong inside her body. Her teeth, those that remained, were black. Some had fallen out entirely. Others were loose in her gums, which bled when she ate. But here is something that will perhaps shock you more. The black teeth became fashionable. The ladies of the court, desperate to emulate their queen, began painting their own healthy teeth black with soot and oil. They thought it made them look sophisticated, worldly, like they too could afford the sugar that only the wealthy consumed. I watched young women with perfect white teeth deliberately destroy them, blackening them with mixtures that stained and rotted. They smiled these grotesque smiles at each other, thinking themselves beautiful, thinking themselves refined. It was madness dressed as fashion, decay worn as jewellery. The Queen ate sugared violets constantly. Candied ginger, sweet wines, marchpane confections. The sugar destroyed what the time had not yet claimed. But she loved sweets the way a child does, and no one could deny the Queen her pleasures. So we brought her more sugar, and we watched her teeth crumble, and we said nothing. And the court ladies followed her example, consuming sugar until their breath was as foul as hers, until their gums bled, until they too needed the ceruse to hide the grey pallor that came with lead poisoning. The wigs were perhaps the worst. She had been losing her hair for years, whether from the lead, from stress, from illness, I cannot say. Probably all three. She owned dozens of wigs made from the hair of other women, elaborate constructions of curls and jewels that must have weighed as much as a small child. Beneath them, her scalp was a landscape of sores and scabs. I know this because I saw it on those rare occasions when the wigs came off in my presence. I saw the lice that crawled there. I saw them moving, living things feeding on her dying flesh. I saw the infected wounds that wept yellow fluid onto the silk pillows. The smell from beneath those wigs was worse than anything else, the concentrated essence of unwashed scalp, of infection, of parasites breeding in the darkness. I saw her scratch at her scalp until her fingernails came away bloody, and then watch as she placed the wig back on, pressing it down onto raw flesh, wincing but saying nothing. If she acknowledged no pain, the expression on her face said, then there was no pain. If she did not acknowledge the horror beneath the hair, then it did not exist. We were all trapped in this conspiracy of silence. The ladies of the bedchamber, the physicians, the courtiers, we moved around her like players in a mask, pretending that everything was well, that she was Gloriana, that she was eternal and perfect and divine. We complimented her beauty. We told her she looked well. We burned incense and scattered herbs and opened windows, all while assuring her that the smell, if she noticed it, and I believe she sometimes did, came from somewhere else. The kitchens, perhaps. The stables. The privies being cleaned. Never from her. I think she believed us because she wanted to. Because the alternative was too terrible. She had built her entire reign on her image, on the idea that she was married to England, that she was more symbol than woman, more icon than flesh. To admit that the flesh was failing would be to admit mortality, and Elizabeth could not afford mortality. So she applied more ceruse, put on heavier wigs, drank more wine to mask the taste in her mouth, and convinced herself that the mirror lied and we told the truth. The guilt I carry is not for what I did, but for what I failed to do. I could have spoken. I should have spoken. Even if it meant losing my position, even if it meant her anger. And her anger was legendary. I should have found the words. Someone should have found the words. But we loved her, you see. That is the terrible irony. We loved her so much that we let her decay. We were so loyal that our loyalty became a kind of cruelty. We were so afraid of hurting her feelings that we allowed her body to hurt in ways far worse than wounded pride. I remember watching the younger ladies paint their teeth black, thinking they were honouring their queen. They were really just participating in a collective delusion, a shared madness where self-destruction was repackaged as devotion. They ruined themselves trying to look like a woman who was already ruined, and no one had the courage to say, stop. This is not beauty. This is not fashion. This is death pretending to be life. I remember the last time I attended her, 3 weeks before she died. She was 70 years old, but she looked ancient, eternal in the way that monuments are eternal, weathered and crumbling, but still standing through sheer force of will. She caught me looking at her, really looking at her, and for a moment our eyes met. In that moment, I think she knew. I think she knew what we had all been hiding, what she had been hiding from herself. The knowledge passed between us like a ghost, and then she looked away, and we never spoke of it. She died shortly after, still wearing her wig, still painted white, still clutching the illusion of Gloriana, even as the woman beneath dissolved into history. I tell you this now not to diminish her. Elizabeth was a great queen, perhaps the greatest England has ever known. She held a country together through wit and will and sheer stubborn determination. She outmaneuvered men who thought themselves her superior, survived plots and invasions, and the constant pressure to marry, to submit, to disappear. She was magnificent, but she was also human. And we forgot that. Or we chose to forget it. We turned her into a symbol and forgot that symbols don't itch, don't smell, don't suffer, don't need to empty their bowels or clean their bodies. Real women do. The lesson I leave with you is this: silence is not loyalty. Silence is not love. Sometimes the greatest act of devotion is telling a truth that no one wants to hear. Power, real power, does not mean being surrounded by people who tell you what you want to hear. It means being surrounded by people who care enough to speak truth, even when it's difficult. I failed my queen, not through neglect, but through devotion without courage. I protected her comfort at the cost of her well-being, choosing the gentle lie over the saving truth. And now, as I stand at the twilight of my years, I see how common that mistake is. How often we watch those we love struggle, yet stay silent to avoid discomfort, to keep the fragile calm we've built upon quiet pretenses. Elizabeth's final years were marked not by isolation of the body, but by the loneliness that comes when no one dares to be honest. That, I believe, was the true tragedy, not her decline, but the silence surrounding it. If there is any lesson in this confession, it is this: love demands honesty. Not cruelty, not defiance, honesty. The kind that risks comfort for the sake of care. That is what I wish I had understood sooner.